Next time you go fishing and lurking in the deep, be sure to bring Arachne Marionettes, the premier net to use in Wraith. Fresh and Buds now.
Fresh and
All right, folks, welcome back to yet another episode of Fresh and Buds. I'm your host, Tommy Fresh, and you are all my buds, and today we are joined by a very special bud. It is Scott Howling Mines. How you doing, my friend? Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it. Doing pretty well. Adapting to post-event blues like everybody else, go from weekends on high to weekends back at work. But other than that, yeah, pretty good. Thanks for asking. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm itching for an event. It's been a while. I had a busy winter, so hopefully getting back to maybe. I think there's something in Hartford coming up that I might try to go to. So if anybody's at Hartford, please say hi if you see me. But we are in the throes of the hunted season now. It is.
Certainly are.
It was release weekend. We're recording on release weekend. Right after the dust has settled at the Calling Memphis. So we're going to talk about our first impressions of these heroes from the Hunted, as well as kind of some takes on how the Calling Memphis went. But before we do that, we got to get to know Scott, right?
Very sweet of you.
Scott's new to the show. Many of you may know Scott, but we need to do it right now. First of all, you've been involved with trading card games for a long time, as long as I can remember, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us where it all began?
Yeah, I guess I can. Oh, that's a horrible statistic. 15 or so years ago at this point, which is kind of crazy. I don't know. I was. There's no real polite way of putting it, but I wasn't exactly a popular kid. You're a nerd. That's the way the culture was back then. That's kind of how things go. And I didn't have an awful lot going for me, but I did thankfully have parents who were eager to get me to be social in some aspect. We found a local game store, and it started like it did for a lot of other people. It was like Match Attack sports stickers, the collectible books and that kind of stuff. And I just clearly had a mind for it. And thankfully, again, my parents have always been super supportive and realized there was a passion there. So I just started playing every card game I could get my hands on, and that hasn't stopped for 15 years now, which is kind of surreal. I just get to do it for a living these days, which is also surreal. So,
yeah, I mean, I love the fact that trading card games bring in the social aspect, because we do live in a world where oftentimes if you kind of get into something quote unquote nerdy, right? Like video games or something like that, there is that route of just sitting at the computer or sitting in front of the TV and just doing it and not really interacting. But the beautiful thing about trading card games is it does give you the opportunity to be social and have fun, meet people that have like-minded, things going on.
Totally. Yeah, I think anyone who's like a regular reader of mine or just like a fan of me in general knows a lot of the mission statement is that it shouldn't matter if you're a nervous beginner or a chiseled veteran. There's a place at the table for you. There should be a place at the table for you. And I need to make sure that table is still there, because otherwise, the kids who were where I was and didn't have a place to go, didn't have something to help find themselves, well, they don't have that resource if I don't create it. So that's kind of a lot of the drive behind where we are. And the eventual hope is to have a little, gaming cafe, coffee shop of my own, so that I can kind of pay that forward and just and keep that going. Because I just think it's more important than ever before. People need that space to just kind of get away from everything.
Yeah, there's a lot going on these days. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to stop. And like 15 years ago, like you said, I mean, that's when I started playing games as well. It was a different culture. It was a different
world. Yeah, totally.
There was some gatekeeping for sure, and it could feel a little rough. So I think the folks that kind of experienced that initially wanted to make a better experience going forward.
Yeah, I think the folks who experienced it just know how important it was. It's crazy to think that my life is just entirely different. I don't know the same people. I don't have the same job. I don't do the same things. If it isn't for the card game space, and it's important to pay that forward, because no doubt in the generation below me there is someone just like that without the resources I was given and the time I was given by other people doesn't find their way to where they're supposed to be. So we gotta make sure that happens.
Yeah, it's our responsibility. But I actually it's pretty impressive to me. I know a lot of people play a lot of different games, but you mentioned that you play every card game that you
just about, yeah. If it's got cardboard squares in it, I've probably played it at some point, yeah.
I've always wondered because, so for context, I was playing a lot of Magic, got into Flesh and Blood, and then there was a brief time where I was playing both, right? A very brief time, and then I completely went to Flesh and Blood, and then maybe I think I went to like PAX Unplugged a few months after I had stopped Magic, and I came back to Magic, and I was like, whoa, I'm like trying to pitch my lands. What is going on here? Like this is nuts. How do you like compartmentalize all the different games?
It's tough. It's really tough. And like I'm certainly not perfect. You'll find that sometimes I'll be writing content and I'll write exhaust instead of tap or like something like this because the mechanics are so similar, but the names are different across games. But I get asked this question a lot, actually, and the truth is I don't think I could if it wasn't my day job. Like, as it stands now, I cover 8 card games full-time. It will be 10 in the near future, thanks to the Gundam and a few others that are on the horizon as well. And if you don't have 40 hours a week to put into that and just kind of get the repetitions in, build the knowledge, and create the content, I don't think you can keep up with that many. It just takes time. It just takes a lot of time and a lot of perseverance.
Now, the repetitions, how do you approach that?
It kind of depends on the game, truthfully, because in some emerging games cases, I haven't got a local scene that I can just kind of smash heads with, which is a bit awkward. Sometimes there's online simulators, that's great. Sometimes it's a case of ingesting other content, using it to inform my choices. Sometimes it really is as lonely as sitting down and goldfishing in your kitchen table. Sometimes it's an amalgamation of those things, but you have to find a way, especially for the smaller games where, and this is where Flesh and Blood was for the longest time, and thankfully we're kind of hitting a renaissance that it isn't really that way, but there's just not a lot of content out there sometimes for smaller games in general, and you kind of have to get a feel for what the community is like hankering for. And then be like, well, okay, how do I make that thing happen? And it's been really fun for me recently, especially with Flesh and Blood. We've had a huge new player boom. Growth has been great. So I've got to do a lot of like, okay, how do you upgrade armory decks? How do you upgrade first strike decks? What do you keep in mind at your first big tournament kind of content? And I don't know, that new player friendly content really hits a note for me because, again, it's all about paying it forward. Always has been. So yeah, you kind of get in on the grassroots. That's why I like to do a lot of podcasts, socializing. I'm terminally online for forever because that's the best way I can get my feelers in and understand what people actually want to see, as opposed to just creating things that SEO tells me I should.
Yeah, and there will always be a need for new players because you hope that there's always, or not new players. There'll always be a need for new players, but there'll always be a need for new player content because new players
it's crazy, really.
will always come.
Yeah, it's totally crazy. Like I don't know if you know this, but I was with a website called Marvel Snap Zone for a long time when Marvel Snap first dropped. I was kind of the face of their YouTube channel, ran all that kind of stuff, and that's what, I don't know, 2.5, maybe 3 years ago now, and I still regularly get messages about new player content that was created for that site where people are like, "Hey, no thanks, I couldn't have figured this out without you." And it just goes to show you never really know the impact something is going to have. I got an old learn to play Flesh and Blood video on my personal YouTube channel that has 11,000 views on a channel that I forgot about. And when I first made it, it was terrible. It's poorly edited. I didn't have the skills I do now, but it's just constantly gained thousands and thousands of views over time because people have found it. They're looking for that thing. And I could never have known that it was going to have that impact when I made it, which is it's so damn cool.
It is. Evergreen content is awesome because you see a lot of it in like new player stuff, lore stuff, and then like kind of just hero breakdowns to a certain extent, because of how this game works. You'll always be able to kind of visit a hero, whether it's in LL or CC still, so some heroes will be in CC for a long
Has felt
time.
like a while now. Yeah.
So it's very cool. Now, speaking of Flesh and Blood, what brought you to this game?
I mean, it sounds like you have a very similar pathway to yourself, funnily enough. I was working at a local game store at the time when Flesh and Blood was kind of coming to its renaissance. Unfortunately, the year 2020 happened, which, is what it is, as we were kind of finally getting product this side of the planet. And, there was some whispers, there was some talk, but getting hold of cards was the real issue in that capacity. And it was a blessing in a way that Magic's competitive scene exploded and just depreciated over time. We lost all the support for Grand Prix and stuff, which is something I was actively doing at the time, was trying to travel the globe, compete at the highest level. And I was looking for a new outlet. So I'd already been dipping my toes in Fab, because when you work at a local game store, you teach yourself to play everything. Every product that comes in, you need to be able to sell to people. You need to at least be able to demo it. So I've been, dipping my toes in, playing with starters. I owned some Arcane Rising. But it was really that iconic graphic that we all know and love at this point. And there was the 4 tiers of play. You're going to have a world championship. You're going to have a national championship. And I was sitting there just like everybody else and was like, well, the game I thought I would be playing forever has just culled all of that. And I still want all of that. I'm not done with it yet. So I guess we have to give that a go. So, I turned up to my first skirmishes, my first callings, and I've never looked back from there, really. So
yeah, similar path for a lot of us. It was important, right? Like, people wanted it, and I'm glad that we still have it. It's still very robust, and it's exciting. Now, I want to talk about your writing.
Well, thank you.
Because you are an excellent writer, article writer. I want to know, where did this skill come from?
It's a broad question. So I don't actually have any formal training or anything. It's not like I went to university or anything like that, which is something I get asked quite a lot. But I guess it came from a need. It's going to sound like a bit of a sob story. I don't mean it like that. I'm not digging for sympathy. But unfortunately, that job I was just talking about at the local game store ended on pretty bad terms, which is, it's fine. These things happen in the space, but it left me pretty desperate to find a way to kind of continue the mission statement about building communities, giving people a space, but without a way to do that. So I was just out there firing off applications in the gaming space, really, and was like, hey, look, this is what I've done in the past. I don't want to leave this space. It's important to me. And it was Marvel Snap Zone, funnily enough, the company above it called .gg, that picked me up. And they were like, well, we need someone to run this. Funnily enough, I'd done Magic tournament coverage for them in the past on like a freelance basis. So we had a previous existing relationship. But they wanted article blogs and blog posts and articles they could reference alongside all of the video content. So I taught myself. I sat down like everybody else. I studied SEO. I studied, grammatical structure, all the kind of nonsense that comes with trying to become a journalist, and was like, well, hey, if this is the only door that's open, I can't afford to let it close because no one else wants me, and everyone else is paying peanuts. So it was just a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, a lot of late nights trying to understand when I can get away with using an M dash. And thankfully, it landed, and the content was popular. People enjoyed it, and it was then that content that kind of chained upwards. It's just consistency through numbers, I think, where the more stuff you create, the more likely someone else is to see the stuff you're creating. So eventually, Channel Fireball reached out and were like, hey, we know you're a Flesh and Blood player. We need Flesh and Blood writers. You can clearly write. Do you want to come and write some content? And I was like, yeah, great. And then from there, they were happy with the work I was doing. Another game gets released. They're like, well, who on the payroll do we know that might want to write about this? Oh, are you interested in writing about it? Well, funnily enough, I'm playing that one as well. And then slowly but surely, the repertoire just expands. And that's how we ended up here.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. And I the thing that's really interesting about it is that every article you write goes into your like portfolio, right? And it all gets published or whatever. I mean, you hope it gets published, but so you kind of just are naturally. It's like a snowball effect. You're naturally becoming more of a, I guess, attractive writer for whichever content that people might want, which is really neat. Now, what would you tell aspiring writers? Because I think there's probably a lot of people out there that had thought about it and really had never really kind of put pen to paper, literally. And what would you tell them in this space, this TCG space, and kind of beyond, because there's obviously tons of things to write about beyond this.
Totally. I guess first and foremost, if you're looking for a set of eyes to kind of give your first work a go, just shoot me a message. I'm always open to people sending me work to go over. But the biggest and most important tip I can give you is stop waiting. And I mean that in the most literal sense. Your first work is always going to suck. And I'm not going to sugarcoat that. I'm not going to be apologetic about it. Quite frankly, if the first stuff you made wasn't your worst stuff, you're not improving. You're not getting better. So you can't rationalize sitting there and going, well, I'll wait till I've got the perfect idea. I'll wait until I'm better, until I've got practice in, because this is your practice. This is how you get better. So like, no, I mean, if you've not got a portfolio, maybe there's nothing to fire off, just kick up a blog, write pen on paper in the hard fashion way, depending on what your goals are. If you want to turn it into a career, if you just want to do it creatively, there's different avenues to kind of explore there. But just start, put the pen on paper, write some stuff, post it on your own personal blog, fire it off to places that might be interested, because I firmly believe in an industry like this, you have to get lucky to succeed, but you have some amount of control over that luck by your consistency, by building a schedule, by treating it like a job, and just producing enough content that you have more chances to get lucky. So that's where I'd encourage you to go. Just start spraying those ideas over a page and just get it out there.
Yeah. I mean, it's great advice, and, consistency is key. It really is. Now, you've shown us that you can use words on paper, Scott, but you can also use words in a booth. You've been in the booth. You got in the booth for Flesh and Blood. Can you tell us about that experience?
Yeah, totally. So I've actually had a little bit of experience in the past. I've done some shoutcasting for various games over the years. It kind of just comes with the territory.
Mm-hmm.
You build up a portfolio where people want you to try other stuff. But I had the pleasure of doing a Battle Hardened remotely with a good friend of mine, Shamir Sami, when we were first kind of just jamming games of Fab. A couple other recorded games for Mansant over the years, and that was about it, really. It's always something I kind of had a passive interest in doing, because I've loved doing it for other games, but I just assumed the call wasn't coming. It'd been a while. I'd uploaded stuff to YouTube channels. I was like, look, this is me recasting calling games from the past, and it had gone nowhere. So I kind of assumed that it wasn't something they were interested in. But I finally got that email for the calling in Leon late last year for the first time, which was very cool. And that came from Alex, lovely Alex LSS, as I'm sure we all are aware at this point. And that was an incredibly surreal experience. I just hadn't really grappled with the idea. I think in a way I had kind of given up on it, because I assumed it wasn't coming down the line. And it was incredible to see things from the other side of the room. We were the first CC calling for Rosetta, so there's a lot of brand new tools on display. We got to see the breakout of Count Your Blessings, Verdants in the feature match area getting their first top 8. And I had such a great commentary partner in Roman Nicholas, who really kind of helped guide me on that journey for the first time. And thankfully, the response to that first performance was pretty incredible. The public response was great, and LSS loved what they saw. So I was lucky enough to get the call for Prague for the world premiere as well, which I've just had the pleasure of doing with Erica Forslöv, Sam O'Byrne, and of course Brian Gottlieb as well, which, let me tell you, that's a bit nerve-wracking. Sitting down and casting alongside Brian is definitely heart in mouth territory, but that was just incredible. Getting to learn all about the set for the first time with everybody. A lot of cards I hadn't seen going into the weekend. We were kept surprised for us as well, which was very cool. Got to do that caster battle on camera, open gem packs for the first time. I got to announce Armory Deck Aurora to the world. It was just like, how is this my life? How are these things that I get to do? And needless to say, I'm eager to do the next one, because the response to that was even more incredible than I could have imagined. And the community has just been incredibly welcoming, and I'm glad that they are a fan of my work in that capacity.
Well, it's awesome to hear, because and especially doing Prague with that cast of characters, right? I mean, Sam, Erica, and Brian are that it's like you assembled the super team, the Avengers, if you will. And I'm including you in that, because it was, everybody brought something great. And I understand the nerve-wrackingness of Brian, but then you start to talk to Brian and you're just like, oh, this
for sure. I think it was very obvious for anyone that kind of watched the whole event. I got one round with Brian on day one, and you could tell I was nervous as all fuck. Pardon the language, but it was very obvious in my demeanor and my manner. And I think we spoke afterwards. He gave me some feedback, and I think after kind of we had that initial conversation, we got to cast a few rounds together on day 2, including the finals of the calling together, which was really cool. And we were much better by working alongside each other. It was a very unique experience, because all 3 of my co-casters have very different energy in the way they carry themselves in the booth. So I was enjoying the experience of trying to match them, but having to move that around between rounds to not throw everybody off. So we got there in the end. It smoothed out eventually.
Yeah, it's a lot like jazz sometimes, right? You got to do some improvisation, which is fun. I think that's awesome.
Totally.
And you did a great job. And
Thank you. I appreciate
I'm excited to see if there's anything down the pipes for you in the booth further. I don't know if you can say anything, if there is.
I don't know anything, straight up. The response again from LSS, just like last time, was very positive. The feedback was great. I'm hopeful. I have reason to believe that there will be, but nothing is set in stone. Nothing is. I'm not owed anything either. So, if you want to see me on the commentary booth again, make yourselves heard, I guess, because that's probably the best way of making sure that happens.
Yeah, no, LSS listens. Now, let's talk about some Flesh and Blood cards. Now, we're going to ask you some of your favorites in this game, Scott.
Absolutely.
And you're going to answer whether you like it or not. How about that?
Understood.
Welcome to the Fresh Faves, where I'm going to ask you a couple of your favorites, and the first is going to be, who is your favorite hero?
This one's not close. Iyslander Stormbind is my beloved. She will be for the rest of time. I am still begrudgingly playing her in Living Legend events, even though she has no favorable matchups. She is just my favorite way to play, and I played the deck at 2 World Championships. I just can't give it up. Iyslander, and almost certainly will always be Iyslander.
Yeah, Iyslander's sweet. We're due for some kind of reprint, right? Soon, hopefully.
Please, Armory deck anytime soon. I'm not fussy.
I'll take a full set because I liked playing Iyslander in limited as well. Because that was it was hard to get Iyslander together in Uprising, but when you did, you felt like.
Well, it's actually funny you say this because I was really averse to drafting Fi in that format. I had to try and get past it for Worlds because I just hated the mirror matches in the limited format. And I've been digging through my bulk recently for like Syndra cards to kind of like rebuild the deck in Classic Constructed, pick out all the stamped stuff from your World drafts, make the deck look nice and everything. And it became very obvious how much I drafted Iyslander as opposed to drafting the other two because I'm like, wow, I found 14 Red Aether Hails and I haven't found a Rising Resentment yet. And it's I clearly had a bit of a bias in that format. So,
Oh, man, that's awesome. Now, what's your favorite weapon?
That's a more interesting question. It's very easy for me to kind of just like say Waning Moon because the connotations are the same alongside the two, but I think we can probably find something a bit more exciting than that. I think it's Symbiosis Shot. Like if it's not Symbiosis Shot, it's probably Flail of Agony. I'll probably put those two together, and I'll explain why. I kind of love weapons that operate on a different dimension than what is kind of stock for the game. And I think originally like weapons that didn't attack felt more rare. They're a bit more common now when we look at Illusionists and everything else. So I love the idea of the Mechanologist weapons that kind of aren't limited to attacking once. I want to be able to kind of make that work and jump through some hoops for that. And Flail of Agony is just so cool because it just makes you pay life instead of paying resources. The same thing. It just kind of has this little niche that it fills that nothing else really does. And they're my favorite weapons in the game, really. Just cool niche designs that are good enough to see play because the thing they do well, they do really well.
Yeah, no, those are both really cool ones. I mean, the Flail, I think we talked about this relatively recently on the show. We need Flail support for not just Flail of Agony, but also Hexagore. Just give us something. I
made that joke so much when the Flail was spoiled. I was like, give me typal Flail cards. I just want to Hexagore some people with Leviah. Come on, it fits in Shadow. It's great. Don't ask questions.
They better hurry before Mandible Claws gets LL'd out. Although, at this point, I don't know if KO's winning anything ever again based on what's been
Problem
going on.
There is some issues there for sure.
Yeah. What's your favorite equipment?
Valiant Dynamo. We kind of alluded to this before we were casting. Actually, I love just equipment that does a very unique thing that doesn't get covered by anything else. Same kind of stories with Phantasmal Footsteps. Really, like they just fill a role that nothing else does. And I've lost too many games to Valiant Dynamo not to kind of love it in some weird way. So I'll go with Dynamo.
Yeah, it's just like you blink and like, oh man, this thing's blocked 8 damages this game. You're like,
we're both on 1, but you somehow still have equipment, and that's totally fair. So great.
Yeah, it's crazy. Now, what's your favorite card that you throw into your deck?
So a Vera, that's tough because you kind of want to assign something to heroes, right? Because it feels more flavorful and fits. But I think I probably have to pick a generic just because of the range of the question. And for that, it's probably Enlightened Strike, honestly. If I'm going with a broad question of just like other card, like it's just universally always good. I love flexibility. I've always been a fan of like the charm style cards from other card games that you'll be familiar with. Like paying more for something that's multimodal It's like, okay, well, I'm paying an extra price, but I have the flexibility of whichever mode I need in the moment. It's just really fun. It creates gameplay decisions. I love making gameplay decisions. So yeah, I'll go with E-Strike.
There's two different kinds of Flesh and Blood players: those who love E-Strike and those who hate E-Strike.
And those who hate it, yes. And it's very much a Marmite card, I find.
Oh, I love it. Now, what class and talent would you be in the world of Wraith if you existed there?
I feel like being a journalist and like leaning towards being creative, I gotta be like something more arcane orientated. So wizard feels like a better fit than something like Runeblade. I don't swing a sword very well, so I'm probably a wizard. I'm definitely not Kano. I'm not smug enough for that. Like, so like, yeah, maybe like Mystic Wizard. Like, I want to be I see myself as a teacher in some ways. I like to create that kind of learn to play content, the informative stuff, and that kind of feels right with Enigma, the Mystic spiel. So, yeah, we'll go with Mystic Wizard. Why not?
Mystic Wizard.
You can judge me in the comments.
No, I think that one's cool. I think we'd love Mystic Wizard if we saw.
I certainly would. Yeah, any excuse.
No transcending anymore, though. I don't want it.
We're allowed to have a break from that for a while, but eventually.
Now, the game has been out for quite a few years now. We've seen a lot of ups and downs in sets. We've seen some great ones. We've seen some, mediocre ones. What is your greatest set of all time as it stands today? And do you think it will kind of stand the test of time for Flesh and Blood?
I gotta say Arcane Rising. And I know it's not a popular choice, but for me, not only was it the beginning of this journey, which gives some bias to the situation, but I just think so much of what came from Arcane Rising is some of the best stories and the most impactful cards that Flesh and Blood has ever seen. If we talk about just powerful cards, it's Art of War, it's Command and Conquer, it's these big iconic generics. If we look at the heroes, I mean, all of them have seen competitive tournament play. You look at Azalea being like the worst deck in history and suddenly, slowly but surely, doing the underdog story, climbing its way to maybe being the first to LL, which is crazy to think about. You look at Dash, who was so dominant for so long, so consistent, such a fan favorite character. And then Kano and Viserai. I mean, it's just like an incredible blend. So many cards that still see play to this day, and just some of the most iconic cards in the game's history as well. Tech by Foundry Heart, Storm Striders, Skullbone Crosswrap. It's just harder to pick a set that feels like it had so much of an impact.
Yeah, I love the design kind of idea there too. We're like, hey, all these heroes are going to care about the top of the deck.
Totally.
And we're going to make them all feel way different, which is so cool.
If you've never had the pleasure of drafting Arcane Rising, first of all, it's terrible, but bear with me. The first time you do it, it's a blast. And if you've never had the experience of just like hate drafting all the Null Rune when you're Kano, you're missing out. Because that's a real unique... No, you don't get any Arcane Barrier. Anyway, 5. Just a fantastic way to play. So yeah, just an incredible set. I wish it was still in circulation, but in a way, I'm very happy that it isn't. It pays kind of homage to its legacy.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Absolutely. That's a great answer. That is a great answer. Now, fast forward to the future. The Hunted has come out. We are here. We've had a little bit of time with it. We haven't had much time with it, right? We there was Memphis this weekend, and we got to play Sealed last week at pre-releases for those who did that. And now we are in the throes of the legality of it in CC. Mm-hmm. So there's a couple of questions that need to be answered here. Well, first, how are these heroes kind of stacking up? And I want to go through the 3 heroes, 3.5 heroes, I guess you can include.
Slippy counts, come on.
Slippy counts, maybe 4.
I mean, if we're being real, it's like 10.5 heroes. But,
yeah.
You know.
That is actually very true. Now, I want to start with my favorite of the 3. And arguably the worst of the 3.
You said it, not me.
Yeah, well, listen, I have hope. I have hope. And there's going to be a meta where Fang is king, is royal as his card states. But how do we feel about Fang in like coming out of pre-release and release weekend?
I'm pretty excited, honestly. I do sadly agree with you that I think at the moment he is the worst of the 3. But that doesn't mean he's bad. Mm-hmm. I think there is some refinement to be done. I think the need to play some of these draconic reactions that maybe aren't quite on the same power level as something like Blade Flurry or other warrior reactions we're used to, definitely mitigates what you're capable of a bit. And I think kind of building the deck in a way that you can make enough fealty to ultimately Voltron and do the thing where your weapons never cost anything, but also make enough fealty that you can sheepishly use them to make a Blade Flurry Draconic. The deck building puzzle there is actually quite difficult, I think, to figure out logistically. There's been some really cool like design choices from people. I know Daniel Correas from the Sunflower Samurais on yellow sync belows and like knows that things that filtering the deck and getting to certain cards is the most important way to go. Some people are, all in, make 3 fealty by turn 2, whackety whack. And obviously there's kind of this ghost of Luminar Ascension lurking in the background, the kind of ability to maybe go combo centric and swing. And I think all in all, that's just a lot of avenues that the hero could go, all of which feel like they could be powerful, and that makes me excited. I think he has enough potential.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Like, it's a little bit of a swing, right? Where the CC deck definitely feels like it's going to need some work, right? And we're going to probably see like a Fang win a couple RTNs, and people are going to be clamoring at what was that list? What was that list? I mean, we saw it with Olympia, for God's sakes. I mean, it is like kind of the warrior way where it's never going to be the top, right? But all of a sudden, if the meta is not prepared for it, I think something like Fang or Bolton.
Yeah, I think it's weird, right? Because if we look at it like never being the top, I would argue like maybe going into PTLA, like Hatchet Story might have been the best deck in the room. Obviously there's a world that Dromai is as well. I think it's a fair discussion, but I think if we can ever end up in a format that's kind of close in terms of tempo back to that one, like I would favor Fang over something like Hatchet Story. I think the deck should perform better in that spot. And that's kind of the environment I'm looking for when it's time to pick up this hero, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I look at the heavy hitters meta as like a bygone dream.
The brief window where we could play Kasai.
Yeah. I mean, that was a special time. It was a really great time. We should all look back on it favorably. I remember people complaining about that meta. I'm like, what are you, crazy?
Yeah, I think it's like heavy hitters meta was definitely like a bread and butter, flesh and blood, everything can be dialed down to a mathematical equation kind of format. And if that's the kind of game you enjoy, it was like just an absolute perfect format for you because you could leverage those skills. But for people that want to attack on a different axis or like to catch people out with tech cards, it was like a bit of an awkward format. It was like not much room to brew. You very much had to be like a value orientated deck. So, and I guess the beautiful thing of card games, right? Like formats never stay the same. Like what's important always changes and rotates. So I'm really glad we have heavy hitters. I'm glad we got to enjoy it. We'll have that again in the future. But I'm also really glad that we don't have it right now because I'll appreciate it more both of those times because I haven't got it always. So yeah, totally.
Yeah. Players like us will come out of the woodwork when those formats come. We're like,
give me any chance to just be like putting Wounded Ball back in my deck and it's not embarrassing. Like, yeah, totally. I'll take any excuse.
Oh yeah. Well, now we have the Wounded Bull that marks a hero, right? On hit. Right?
Yeah, like you're slowly power creeping my cards. I'm still gonna play Wounded Bull. I own alpha foils. Okay, you can't stop me. Like it's just.
Understandable. But yeah, Fang's like interesting in that way where, probably will have his day, in a format like that. But then you look at the limited side of things. I will say I felt like I was playing the most powerful limited deck I've ever played when I was playing Fang, which is
he's up
crazy.
There. We kind of saw this firsthand in Prague. It feels like it's the, for lack of a better phrase, a default hero when you're playing sealed in this format. Like if you look at your pool, you're not really sure what's going on. Fang is probably where you should go because your cards are just exceptionally redundant. Hilariously, it was one of the most difficult things when I was learning the set to cast Prague. I was like, man, these cards all do the same thing. How am I supposed to remember which one is which? They're all various shades of orange and red. Like the artwork's not going to help. And I think that's truly a positive for him when it comes to limited play experience because it's just very easy to end up with a functional Fang deck. Your cards are mostly replaceable, even if you haven't got the best versions of stuff. And that's not like a perk that Syndra or Arachne have. They very much require specific tools to perform at their best, which I don't think Fang does. I think you can get away without most things.
Yeah. As long as you can create some fealty, I think you're like already doing.
It's not like create some fealty or mark your opponent, right? Both of those count, which kind of opens the range of what's acceptable. much wider. So yeah.
Absolutely, and it's like, well, and he was the hero more so than Syndra that made the use out of the fealties, actually, rather
Totally,
than,
yeah.
like actually wanting to pop him or keep him, which was kind of neat. Now, I'm interested to see where he kind of lands going forward into this format. Like, I think there's a good chance that we see a couple heroes LL in the next couple weeks at RTN. I don't know if that helps or hurts Fang, but what do you expect to see coming into the RTN season in that regard?
I think this current RTN season, at least week 1, is pretty clearly going to mirror what we saw in Memphis. I think. I don't think there's too much reason to expect deviation from that. I expect a lot of Viscerai, some more Viscerai for good measure. Some Zen, some Enigma, some new, some Syndra clearly off the back of the spoiler winner for the weekend, which I'm sure most people will have seen by now. And then a good mixture all the way down beyond that. A little bit of Aurora, but mostly MST plus Rune Blades plus Ninja. It's kind of my overall arcing image for the start of the format. But that changes pretty dramatically, I think, after week 1. I think we all kind of expect Zen to go. I think there's a good chance Viscerai does too, which is a bit of a heartbreaker for me personally, but I totally understand. That changes dynamics quite a bit. I think there's a good number of decks currently that are being held down by Viscerai in particular, that are just very, especially the Brutes, that is very poor into Rune Blade in general. So if we lose those heroes, the decks that they are kind of pushing out get room to breathe. And interestingly, I think Fang preys on the decks that then get to breathe. So I don't expect it to see like an immediate upsurgence, but I think if the format kind of flips in a way where those decks can really come up the ranks, that's the time to play Fang, because then you have a room that you're going to want to prey on.
Yeah, so I guess get your Fang cards now, folks.
While they're cheap.
Yeah, while they're cheap.
Something TCG player, not at all biased in any way whatsoever.
Not at all. Now, let's move on to Arachne Marionette. Because Arachne Marionette showed up in numbers at Memphis, and I gotta see what the conversion rate was. It wasn't terrible.
I think it's like 20%, right? You say it's like 5 of them made day 2 or something. Yeah.
The deck is cool, and I think people are going to love this deck, right? Like that was always going to be a given, right? That this is a fun, like, assassin, right? I don't know if it'll ever be the best assassin, but it's going to be the most fun, in my opinion. What's your take on Arachne Marionette?
I think this deck is such a puzzle, and I think it plays so unintuitively than what most people thought. I think when we saw the hero revealed, it was like, okay, I want to mark my opponent and become an agent of chaos. And the more I've played the hero, I actually never want to become an agent of chaos. Like, it's actually a drawback the majority of the time, at least until you're like in those endgame scenarios where attack reactions are incredible. But for the most of the game, I would love to just be Marionette. Like, my stealth attacks coming in for 4, getting go again on hit is just crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And I actually don't want to remove that mark a lot of the time, which is just completely different than what I expected when the card was revealed. I think this deck is very powerful. I think that, to me, Marionette feels like the kind of deck that has a really balanced skill ceiling. I think if you put the time in on this hero, you're going to punk a lot of people in spots where it matters, because you'll understand interactions and synergies and cool little tips and tricks that you can get away with that the opponent just won't know possible. Like the obvious face-up ones, things like Flick Knives with the Hunter's Claves and stuff. Like, I can mark you instant speed. I can do that kind of stuff. But there's a lot more lurking under the surface between Take Up the Mantle and Kiss of Death shenanigans with toxicity. Most people don't realize if I spike with Blood Rot or Kiss of Death and then flick it at you, you get another Blood Rot. Yeah. Even if it hit you, you get both, which is crazy. So like, there's all these kind of little niche interactions that I think he can really leverage, and that's going to be just a great deck for people that want to put the time in to become a specialist on a hero. And I think outside of that, the hero will kind of be a bit of an anomaly for a while, where people figure out the best ways to keep you marked, but not stop attacking you, because I don't want to just give you infinite time. Yeah. But if I attack you, I lose the mark. So what do I do? And I think that's kind of the interesting deck building puzzle there.
Yeah, it should be interesting. I played against a couple so far. I was just like jamming games on Talishar, and there is so much more you have to keep track of, because like against things like New, for example, or even Azuri, you kind of eventually, as the opponent, kind of learn what to expect. Where I feel like that's where Marionette's going to kind of excel, where maybe you don't know what to expect all the time. Like, and I think we'll feel closer to a true assassin in that way, which, I'm sure Brian is, kicking his
Ecstatic
feet.
about,
Yeah, kicking his feet right now, just like, oh, which
Come on, give it to me. I think it really kind of only took me a handful of games of Classic Constructed to kind of understand the vision for this. I think my second game on Marionette, I flicked my Hunter's Clave to mark my opponent, try and turn my Mark of the Black Widow into a 4, and they discarded the Shelter from the Storm to blunt the Flick Knives, and I was like, I get it. I understand the vision. Suddenly, it all just makes sense, and I think there's going to be a lot of that realization happening for most of the player base within the next few months. And we'll see where Arachne lands. I think the deck has a lot of potential, and I think the players that are going to be good on it are going to be very good on it. It feels like a Kano-style hero in that capacity.
Yeah.
Like the people that love it, they sit down, they learn all the intricacies, and if you get paired into one, it's not good news, even if the matchup is good for you, because the player playing it is insane. It feels like one of those heroes to me.
Because that they practice the good matchups and really practice the bad matchups.
Oh, yeah.
You're like, oh, boy. Now let's talk about the winner of Memphis, Syndra. Another ninja, a ninja that seems to be good off the bat. I don't think anybody expected less. Like, naturally, her hero ability was quite good. The kunais are very cool. And that kind of play style is going to just be able to overtake some games. What are your thoughts on Syndra out of the gates here?
Above all else, I think she's like the most thematic hero we've ever seen in Flesh and Blood. Like, I love, one of my favorite things about Fab is being able to sit down, play a game, and feel like the hero I'm playing. And Syndra does that. You feel like you are constantly flicking like slightly annoying knives at your opponent as the game goes on. And that's just a masterstroke of design, in my opinion. But in terms of power level, I'm actually kind of surprised. I've been tinkering with Syndra myself, but I was on much more of a 15 blue, don't immediately lose to Jarl Vertredi kind of version of Syndra, as opposed to this 69 red shenanigans we've seen out of Memphis. But I think this is kind of the perfect week for this deck. There's a lot of shenanigans that the deck can do with Blood Splattered Vest, things you can do with the feet and the Art of the Dragon attacks that just caught people off guard. And we saw time and again, it's like random copies of Breaking Point, like ruining an Assassin's Day over the course of the feature match. And it's like, oh, you forgot Breaking Point existed. I think most people did. It's been a hot second since we've seen it. I think that the deck has a ton of potential, and I'm mostly interested in seeing how it adapts going forward now that it's a known entity. Because I'm not so sure you can afford to be so resource light and interactable when that is a known fact. So I'm super curious to watch the evolution of Syndra.
Yeah, the thing that's impressed me about Syndra is that kind of it feels less powerful, right? Throughout the game, it feels less powerful than like Zen and Fi at like peak. But then the end game for Syndra always seems to feel like really, really such a burst of all this like small ping damage that if you weren't prepared for it, like you're like, oh, okay. Like this is like the late game ninja that isn't Turtle Katsu, I guess. Yeah,
for sure. Like, I think the best way I tried to describe this to a new player near me recently who was struggling to understand why the deck was good when they were watching it on camera during Memphis. And the best way I could explain it to people was like, imagine you're an aggro deck, but your opponent starts at 33. Because that's what Syndra is. Yeah. You have just enough unpreventable damage over the course of the game with Flick Knives and Blood Runs Deep and these kind of effects that you are an aggro deck and your opponent has 7 less health. If they're playing something with less than 40 health, it's even worse. And it's like, well, does that not sound appealing as a hero ability? Well, yeah, it sounds great, actually. If my goal is to get the game over as quickly as possible, my opponent starts with less health, sign me up. And I think that's just kind of a very appealing part of her dynamic is you should be favored in the aggro mirrors because if you're both like passing like ships in the night, you should have more health than the opponent because of how Flick Knives works. So, yeah.
Well, it's, hey, more ninja, more fast decks to
all I know is that I might be sleeving up some Channel Lake Frigids at my RTNs because I get the feeling that there's going to be a lot of red line shenanigans going on, and I've been dying to make some friends with ice cards again. So we'll see.
Yeah, we saw Michael Hamilton play Jarl over the weekend.
I need that list, man. Like Rollwood Hammer, like we're playing in Tangle and all the Earth. Sign me up. I'm all about figuring out what's going on there. So. Yeah, maybe.
I think he posted the list. He said that he wouldn't have played it again. I don't think that weekend, but
that's also good to know. But that's never stopped me before. So.
Yeah, that's true.
We'll see. I certainly don't know what I'm picking, but I think if you're trying to like metagame the room a bit, something like Jarl is probably a super solid pick because who wants to play Enigma into a room full of Syndra?
Yeah, no, nobody.
So, and it's like, okay, great. So if it's a room full of Syndra and no Enigma, I'm pretty happy playing the Ice Guardian. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
I feel the same way about Riptide. I'll tell you that.
That's cool. Yeah, very similar story.
Oh man. So I mean, other than that, those are the three heroes. Oh, I guess let's talk about Slippy because Slippy exists.
He does, and I think he's very good actually.
I don't know much about Slip Through the Cracks. Can you enlighten me a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So I've had the pleasure of playing Solitary Confinement in Blitz, which is essentially the same hero if you ignore the fact that you give Go Again to other assassins in Classic Constructed, because Chaos, which is the sole reason for that. So I had some familiarity in the past, kind of just of the play patterns that you're looking for. And for me, Slip Through the Cracks is like what I think most people expected Assassin to be when the class was spoiled, because you can never get it right. Like, the first stealth attack always has Go Again. They have 3 cards in hand. It could be anything. Mm-hmm. It could even be a boat. The attack could be 12. It could be bait. It could be another attack. It could be 1 buff and a codex. It could be a Sigil of Solace. It could be a pie. It could be anything. And I think that's just kind of a huge strength for people that get repetitions in on Slip Through the Cracks. You are an aggressive deck that has all the tricks up your sleeve. Your attacks are worth great on rate. They block great. So you just have all the flexibility to make the decisions and set the tempo over the course of a game. And I think that's exactly where I want to be when I'm playing an aggro deck, because most aggressively slanted heroes don't get access to Mark of the Black Widow. You don't get these Bonds of Agony turns. It's like, cool, I'm racing you. But also, my race is that my chain ends with a card that rips 2 cards out of your hands. Yeah. Like, I'm gonna win the race, and that's a great place to be. And yeah, you just get to play all the disgusting assassin cards, and also just never give up tempo, which I just think is very impressive. The downside to that, of course, is that your new matchup and your marionette matchup kind of suck. Because they are you but better, because you've given them the same hero ability. Yeah. So I think if anyone can solve that problem, or at least one of those problems, the hero probably stands to be in a really good spot in terms of how playable it is. I am maybe a little cautious until New leaves us about the actual practicality of that. But I don't think that's an insolvable problem. That feels tangible. I think someone could definitely figure out how to make that matchup approachable. And if you can, I like the hero. I think it's in a great spot.
Yeah, it's very cool. I'm happy that it exists. It's Solitary Confinement was always pretty neat to me, and Slippy just being
it's so much fun.
Is so
and
cool.
Also, like, you are the single best Kiss of Death deck in the world, because you never have to get the second chain link the hard way. You can just on Kiss of Death. It's got Go Again. Great. Okay. Second attack, flick it. Like, you just never fail to flick the Kiss of Death as Slippy, which is in of it itself just like very powerful, because you get to play cards like Toxicity and know that you're going to make the thing come together at some point, because you need less moving pieces. Like, if I want to do that in Marionette, I need to find a source of Go Again, I need to find a Kiss of Death, I need to find the buff, I need to find everything else. Well, one less thing to find if I'm playing Slippy, which makes that way more appealing, I think.
Now, here's a funny interaction I just thought about, because I play a lot of Riptide. So you play Slippy, and then you see that you're playing against Azuri, New, Marionette. Do you just sideboard? Like, you just make sure you have 3 frailty traps in your sideboard, because you just know it's always going to kind of hit with the frailty?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a good chance, like, because Slippy's like maybe interested in playing the headpiece anyway, the Mask of Deceit. And if you're like willing to mark your opponent with the claves going into the turn, you can always pick Trapdoor. So if you want to find the trap when it matters, you have the ability to do that with your Traverse the Spider-Verse. So I fully encourage you to give that a shot. And I think there's definitely some potential there as well, because it's the old Riptide trick, right? Give them the auras, and then they trigger all my traps as a result. And you can do some similar stuff. There's a lot of tricks in the toolkit for Slippy.
I love it. But it's very cool. Now, to wrap this up, how do you feel about the Hunted and the way it's affecting Flesh and Blood?
I hope I don't regret this, but I love this set, which is kind of surprising for me, because when the spoiler season started, my hype was very minimal. Like, all 3 of these classes typically aren't things that I go out of my way to explore. But between kind of getting the opportunity to do Prague and like feel the hype building firsthand, and then kind of just watching as People are getting their hands on cards. People are clearly having fun. And what I think is probably one of the better limited environments we've ever had as well. The set just kind of feels like a home run. It feels like we're heading in the right direction. Previous design kinks are getting ironed out. I'm really happy to have a set that feels powerful. All the heroes look like they're going to show up, but they're not going to misfail the format and be the top 3 for a hot second. And that's perfect for me. That's exactly what I want. I want the cards to feel impactful, but not overwhelming, so I don't have to buy the set if I can't. So yeah, for me so far, the Hunted is honestly a home run, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it ages.
Awesome. I agree. I'm liking it so far, and I hope I don't regret you saying that either, Scott. So
yeah, clip it, guys. Yeah, I mean, I look forward to you tweeting this back at me in 6 months when all 3 heroes have LL'd already. But
oh man, I can't even imagine that. But that would be kind of funny. I mean, just to have a warrior LL would be kind of funny. Now,
it would be a nice touch. Yeah.
We do have listener questions. These come from the Buds Discord, which is free for anybody to join. It's in the show notes below. First one comes from Darth Prentice, aka Greg, who asks, "How do you get your beard to look so good?"
It doesn't look so good now. I'm sitting in my home and it's not been taken care of today. But honestly, first of all, thank you for the compliment. That means a lot. But nothing special, really. Like, it's just daily care, beard oils, like you would expect. I have a great cherry one that I'm maybe a bit too addicted to. Just buy a good comb, and then trust your barber. It's probably my best bit of tip otherwise. I think if you want to grow a beard out and kind of rock something a little longer, you either need to be very confident that you know what you're doing to be able to strip things away, or you need to swallow your pride and spend some money. And I do the latter because I'm crap with scissors. My depth perception is terrible. I will just hack a chunk out somewhere when I'm trying to take care of things. So I'll just try my best to stay on top of it, book in regular barber appointments, and let them be good at the thing they're good at. Yeah. So yeah, good daily care, and then don't be too proud is probably the tips there.
Great advice. William from the Table Pit doesn't ask, just says, "We got Guardian boots." Sorry, I know that's not a question. Now, I will also say William tried to pull a fast one and ask the Fresh Faves. He knows the rules. I asked the Fresh Faves, William. How dare you? Do you have any response to Guardians getting boots?
I do. William, you can't read. Those boots are generic and they're called Flexors. But thank you for your input.
Orc Knight, aka Jesse Harper, comes in and asks, "How does it feel to be where you are now compared to a year ago? Congratulations on your success, and I'm excited to see where your journey with LSS and casting goes from here."
That's an incredibly kind comment from Jesse, and they've been very vocal with their support over the last few months as well. It should tell you about how I really feel about what's happened over the last year, in the fact that I don't have words for it, because they literally pay me for words. That's my job. Surely I should be able to do that. But I didn't picture it at all. I've been fairly open with this, and I think it's important to be as well. I have notoriously terrible imposter syndrome, like real bad. And I've kind of found my own coping mechanisms over the years. I've kind of learned that you can't struggle with imposter syndrome unless you're successful. It's kind of one of the qualifying criteria in the first place. So to kind of just see the outcry of support and then just keep chaining things together, I finally have days where I wake up and I don't wonder if I deserve this anymore. And it's hard to kind of explain what that does to a person. And the way that kind of makes you change, because when you spend so long on survival mode, just not thinking you deserve anything that you're getting, you're your own worst enemy. It's all about self-sabotage. And I think to finally be in a spot where I can rock up to an opportunity and go, this event is better because I'm involved with it. This piece of work is better because I wrote it. It's a feeling that's really hard to put into words, but one I will eternally be grateful for. And the Flesh and Blood community has played a huge role in making me feel that way. So thank you.
Great question, Jesse. Boosting Spendog asks...
Hey, Spendog.
Well, ask Scotty, what's your favorite hero? I already asked Scott
You
that.
did.
Golly, Boosting Spendog. And asked, what's your favorite aspect of Flesh and Blood? Is it the community, shiny cards, blood debt, etc.?
I could give you a list if you really wanted me to really sit there. But I think, truthfully, the thing that always made Flesh and Blood stand out for me on a card game level... if we're talking aesthetics, it's like the Marvels. I think they knock them out of the park nearly every single time. They're just some of the best artwork in the industry. But it's also the only game I play where you start at full power. Like, most card games typically are designed for you to crescendo. They want you to play the game of building the tower, and then when you get the tower built, you get to fire your guns, and that's all cool. That's fantastic. Fab doesn't work that way. You start at the top of the tower, and then you try and scratch and claw and find a way to survive as the opponent is slowly knocking yours down. And that's a very different gameplay experience, and I think it's what really makes it have such a special place in my heart, is that it doesn't feel like anything else in that respect. So probably that.
Awesome. Capolo asked, which TCG would you recommend a Fab player try?
It's a great question. I'm actually kind of working on a global article right now of like how to find the game for you, because I think a lot of people don't necessarily know where to go. Fab players typically I kind of view as a more competitively minded individual. Obviously, everyone's different. Communities are wide, vast, and all kinds of different folks. But I would typically recommend things that are like competitively driven for Fab players, because it tends to be their tendency. So I would for now be looking towards something like Lorcana, interestingly enough. If the competitive scene is something you want, it's got the power of Disney behind it, and the price support is incredible, which is a huge factor for people in that capacity. If you're looking for something like gameplay-wise, I would probably encourage you to explore something closer to One Piece, which has definitely been the other game recently that I've been having a great time with. It just feels decision dense in the same way that a game of Fab is. And if you enjoy making decisions that feel like they're weighty, that's the kind of game I would push you towards instead.
Cool. And now Sigma asked a couple questions, and a lot of them have to deal with brutes, of course. First one, how much would you like to see a Savage Land set?
I would. I think we're due one. It's definitely one of the scenarios that we haven't necessarily finished visiting yet. I think I would love our big green bean of Rhinar to get some more support and really kind of put him. I say that, but obviously Eugene was a monster over the weekend in Memphis, so maybe not. But I think I'm on board for a Savage Land set. I think it would also be a good place to maybe introduce a new class or two, which I'm definitely hoping for in the near future. So yeah, big thumbs up. Would love to go to Savage Lands.
And then follows up that question with Brute stream games seem to entertain the audience a lot. Do you think Brute deserves better in the game, or should it just stay in the shadows?
I get it, because there's a shadow Brute. You're very funny, Sigma. This is a tough one, I think. And you're not necessarily going to like my answer, but I think Brute always has to kind of ride the line of being okay but never good. And I'll explain why. And it's a similar feeling to Kano, really, in that they want rolling dice to be part of Brute's identity. And I think that's a part of what is very entertaining on cameras, is those scab skin rolls, and is it a 1, is it a 6, what's going to happen? And those mechanics are fine in small doses, but they're really polarizing for a lot of people. And I think they're the kind of thing that becomes universally hated very quickly if they're ever the best thing in the format. So if you want those cards to exist and you want that style of play to exist, it needs to be at a level where it's a niche choice or a meta game pick, never the best thing. Otherwise, you create some real feel bads. And that's kind of what has me leaning towards keeping Brute somewhere in the middle of the field.
Yeah, I agree. I think we would have to see some kind of paradigm shift in Brute design before we see like...
And I don't think that's what they want. I think the Brute players love what their hero does currently. I think, as you say, they're very entertaining on camera because of these elements, the random discards, the die rolls and stuff. It feels very brutish, and I didn't think about it, and whoops. and that's great. It feels thematic. I love it. But there's a line to walk when it comes to customer satisfaction, and there's some risks associated with those cards. So we just got to be careful how much you turn the dial, I think.
Yeah.
And I'm realizing I sound like a game designer. I'm responsible for none of those decisions.
No.
Just can do whatever they want.
It's good to speculate. And then finally, a question that isn't about Brutes. What would you like to see LSS do to make other mechanologists besides Dio better without breaking the game?
This is interesting. I think for me, I actually played a lot of OG Dash back in the day. Obviously, heading in the game Arcane Rising through Crucible is the deck everybody played. But I loved that deck was able to pivot between what it wanted to do. I loved being able to be a boost aggressive deck in some matchups and then be my pistol plasma purifier deck in other matchups. And I think the flexibility was one of its strongest strengths. And I would like to see maybe that explored a little more in the mechanologist identity, because a lot of the problems for heroes like Teklevossen and Max right now is that they have some really polarizing matchups that are awful. They don't really have the tools required to solve them, because there's no pivot to move on to a different kind of game plan. There's no the different mech that Max could jump into. There's no Evo that Tekla can equip to solve the Enigma problem. And I think for me, those sidesteps need to exist for those heroes to thrive. There's got to be more plan Bs that don't feel like a plan F. And that's kind of where we currently are. So I would say something of that ilk.
Very cool. Thank you for the questions, everybody. And thank you, Scott, for answering them.
No, thank you for the questions. That was cool.
Yeah, so wonderful.
Didn't know anyone cared.
That's going to do it for the show. I had a lot of fun, Scott. I hope you did too.
Of course, yeah.
I'd like you to plug everything you like to plug, and, well, I'll just extend another thank you to you.
Oh, no, thank you very much. Thank you for having me again. If you want more from me, you can find me in several places. I am at Howling Minds on X, formerly Twitter. I'm at howlingminds.com over on Blue Sky, where I am significantly more active. Or you can come and find my work over on TCG Player these days for any slice of life card game you enjoy. I am probably writing about it. So feel free to reach out. Feel free to come and chat. And if I can be of assistance, shoot me a message. Yeah.
Awesome. Please check out Scott, and you can continue to find me on everything at freshbudspod. Check out the YouTube. Give the old like, comment, subscribe. Discord, it's in the show notes. And then Fresh Juice, my other podcast I do with my cousin, where we talk about indie video games. Check that out as well. And finally, Scott, always like to end the show talking about food. What's some food you want to talk about?
I'm a big food enjoyer. So I think a lot of us are, because when you travel for card games, you get to be a little bit explorative, try different things. My recent favorite food memory, I had an incredibly long layover on the way to Japan for Osaka for Worlds this year. I had the pleasure of staying in China for 8-9 hours between flights or so. And I learned that that's the perfect amount of time to eat 2 bowls of pho. Like, there's no need to have one. You can have one when you arrive, and then you'll be hungry again and have plenty of time to eat a second one before your flight, which is a really good place to be when you're in China. The pho's really good.
Oh, man. Oh, yeah, we just had a new place open up by us that we've been going to, especially in the cold weather. It's like, oh, man, it hits really good in that cold weather. And now I'm hungry, of course. And because I'm hungry, I don't have time to get Charmer on the show, but we'll get to him eventually. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, everybody. Please stay fresh and enjoy the hunted.